I'm 73 years old, and I thought I'd seen everything life could throw at me. Wars, divorces, business failures, the death of loved ones. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the moment I watched my own daughter sprinkle what looked like rat poison into my soup. The spoon was halfway to my mouth when I caught her reflection in the kitchen window behind me. Sarah was hunched over her own bowl, but her eyes were locked on mine, waiting. Watching. Like a vulture circling roadkill. If you've ever had that gut-wrenching moment where everything you thought you knew about someone crumbles in an instant, hit that subscribe button. Because what happened next will make you question everyone you trust. I set the spoon down slowly, my hand trembling, not from age, but from the ice-cold realization that my only child, the little girl I'd raised alone after her mother died, might be trying to kill me. The soup was still steaming. Chicken noodle. Sarah's specialty, she'd said when she brought it over that Tuesday evening in November. She'd been visiting more often lately, ever since I'd mentioned updating my will. Ever since the doctors found that shadow on my lung that turned out to be nothing but scar tissue from my construction days. But Sarah didn't know it was nothing. As far as she knew, her old man was dying. I pushed back from the kitchen table in my small apartment, the same cramped place I'd moved to after selling the family house following Martha's funeral 5 years ago. The chair legs scraped against the linoleum with a sound like fingernails on glass. "Something wrong with the soup, Dad?" Sarah asked, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes sharp as broken glass. She was 42 then, still beautiful in that way that reminded me painfully of her mother, but there was something predatory in her expression I'd never seen before. "Just letting it cool," I said, buying time while my mind raced. In that reflection, I'd seen her add something to my bowl before bringing it to the table. A small vial, emptied quickly while she thought I was adjusting my reading glasses. The motion was practiced, deliberate. You have to understand, I'd built my reputation in construction by noticing details others missed. A beam slightly out of alignment. A foundation crack hairline thin but dangerous. It's what kept buildings standing and workers alive. And right now, every instinct I'd honed over 50 years in the business was screaming danger. I excused myself to the bathroom, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. In the mirror, I looked at the face staring back, weathered, lined with 7 decades of hard living, but the eyes still sharp. Still alive. And I intended to keep them that way. When I returned to the kitchen, I made a show of sitting back down, but I'd already made my decision. While Sarah was distracted, checking her phone with that nervous energy she'd had since childhood, I did something that probably saved my life. I switched our bowls. The movement was subtle, just a grandfather reaching across to straighten the salt shaker, accidentally bumping the bowls in the process. To anyone watching casually, it would look like a clumsy old man's mistake. But I'd calculated every inch of that switch. Sarah looked up just as I was settling back into my chair, her bowl now in front of me, mine in front of her. "Oops," I said, starting to reach for the bowls. "Let me fix that." No, it's fine, Dad," she said quickly. Too quickly. Her smile was strained now, and I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Panic? Relief? Soup, right? We ate in silence after that. I watched her take small, careful spoonfuls while I consumed what had been her bowl with theatrical enthusiasm. The real chicken noodle soup was delicious, Martha's old recipe that Sarah had learned by heart. But I barely tasted it. I was too busy watching my daughter's face grow paler with each bite she took. 20 minutes later, Sarah excused herself to the bathroom. I heard her retching violently, the sound echoing through the thin walls of my apartment. When she came back, her face was gray and slick with sweat. "I think I'm coming down with something," she said, gathering her purse with shaking hands. "I should head home." I nodded sympathetically, playing the concerned father even as my blood ran cold. "Drive carefully, sweetheart. Call me when you get there." She never called. The next morning, I found myself standing in the shower longer than usual, letting the hot water pound against my shoulders while I processed what had happened. My daughter, my little Sarah who used to make me breakfast in bed on Father's Day, who'd cried in my arms when boys broke her heart, who'd held my hand at her mother's funeral, had tried to poison me. But why? I spent the rest of that week going through the motions of my retirement routine. Morning coffee at the diner down the street. Afternoon walks through Riverside Park. Evening news with a microwave dinner. But underneath the normalcy, my mind was working overtime. I started paying attention to things I'd dismissed before. How Sarah had been asking about my finances lately. Her casual questions about whether I'd updated my insurance policies. The way she'd perked up when I mentioned feeling under the weather. And then there was the will. I made Sarah my sole beneficiary years ago, a simple document that left everything to my only child. The house sale had netted nearly $400,000, most of which was sitting in savings accounts and CDs. My pension and Social Security weren't much, but combined with the life insurance policy from my union days, Sarah stood to inherit close to $600,000 when I died. That was a lot of money for someone who'd been struggling financially since her divorce 3 years earlier. Her ex-husband Jake had cleaned her out in the settlement, taking the house and most of their assets while sticking her with half the debt. She'd been living paycheck to paycheck ever since, working as a paralegal at a small firm downtown. $600,000 would solve all her problems. If her father was dead. By the weekend, I'd made a decision that would change everything. I drove across town to the office of Detective Ray Kowalski, a guy I'd known since he was a beat cop 20 years ago. Ray had worked security on some of my construction sites back in the day, and we'd stayed in touch over the years. "Tommy Rodriguez," Ray said, looking up from his paperwork as I walked into the precinct. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" I told him everything. The soup, the reflection, the switch, Sarah's reaction. Ray listened without interruption, his cop face giving nothing away. "That's a hell of a story, Tommy," he said when I finished. "But you know I can't do anything without evidence. You don't have the bull, the substance, nothing concrete." "I know," I said. "But I need you to know, in case something happens to me." Ray leaned back in his chair, studying me with those sharp eyes that had made him a good detective. "You really think your daughter would try to kill you?" "I don't want to think it," I said. "But I can't ignore what I saw." He was quiet for a long moment. "Tell you what. If anything happens, and I mean anything suspicious, you call me immediately. And maybe start documenting things. Keep a record." I left the precinct with a plan forming in my mind. If Sarah was really trying to kill me, she wouldn't stop with one failed attempt. Desperate people do desperate things, and financial desperation had driven people to murder since the beginning of time. I was going to give her another opportunity. But this time, I'd be ready. That night, I called Sarah from my landline. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice still hoarse from whatever she'd ingested. "How are you feeling, honey?" I asked. "Better," she said, though she didn't sound it. "I think it was just a 24-hour bug." Good. "Listen, I was thinking, would you like to come over for dinner Sunday? I found your mother's old recipe box, and I thought maybe we could cook together like we used to." The pause on the other end of the line stretched just a heartbeat too long. "That sounds wonderful, Dad," she said finally. "I'll bring dessert." After I hung up, I sat in my recliner staring at the phone. Sunday was 3 days away. 3 days to prepare for what might be the most important performance of my life. Because I was going to let my daughter try to kill me again. And this time, I was going to make sure she succeeded. The hardware store clerk looked at me like I'd lost my mind when I bought the hidden cameras. 3 of them, small as coat buttons, wireless, with enough battery life to record for 12 hours straight. "Building a security system?" he asked, scanning the barcodes with unnecessary enthusiasm. "Something like that," I said, paying in cash. No paper trail. Ray Kowalski had taught me that much during our conversation. I spent Saturday morning installing them. One in the kitchen, positioned to capture the entire dining area and counter space. Another in the living room, angled toward the front door. The third in the hallway, covering the approach to both the kitchen and bathroom. If Sarah was going to make another attempt, I wanted every second recorded. But cameras weren't enough. I needed something more, a way to control the narrative, to ensure that whatever happened would clearly show premeditation on her part. That's when I remembered the emergency stash. Years ago, when Martha was sick and the medical bills were piling up, I'd kept a small amount of cash hidden in the house. Old construction worker habit, always have something put away for the worst-case scenario. After her death, I'd moved the money to my apartment, tucked away in a hollowed-out dictionary on my bookshelf. $12,000 in hundreds. Sarah knew about it. I'd mentioned it once during a conversation about home security, warning her that if anything ever happened to me, she should check the dictionary first before letting the landlord clean out the apartment. At the time, I thought I was being a responsible father, making sure she knew where to find emergency funds. Now, that knowledge was going to be the bait in my trap. Sunday morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of November wind that cuts through your jacket and settles in your bones. I spent an hour positioning everything perfectly in the apartment. The dictionary was moved to the kitchen counter, visible but not obvious. The cameras were recording. My phone was set to speed dial Ray Kowalski's number. I even prepared 2 different meals. The main course was Martha's famous pot roast, a recipe that required hours of slow cooking and filled the apartment with rich, homey smells. But I also prepared a backup meal, something quicker that could be ready if needed. 2 sets of plates, 2 sets of silverware, everything doubled. Because this time, I wasn't going to switch bowls. This time, I was going to eat whatever Sarah prepared for me. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock. Sarah had always been punctual, a trait she'd inherited from her mother. "Hi, Dad," she said, stepping into the apartment with a forced brightness that didn't reach her eyes. She was carrying a bakery box, chocolate cake, my favorite, and a small purse that seemed heavier than usual. She looked healthier than she had the previous Tuesday, but there was something different about her demeanor. More determined. More resolved. "Smells amazing in here," she said, moving toward the kitchen with the practiced ease of someone who knew the space intimately. "Just like Mom used to make." We spent the next hour talking about safe topics. Her job, my health, memories of Martha. But I was watching her eyes, the way they kept drifting to that dictionary on the counter. The way her hand occasionally moved to her purse, as if checking that something was still there. When dinner was ready, I served the pot roast while Sarah prepared drinks. Iced tea for both of us, made from the pitcher I kept in the refrigerator. She insisted on handling the beverages, just as she had with the soup. I watched her reflection in the microwave door this time, the angle even better than the kitchen window had been. She thought I was focused on carving the meat, but I saw everything. The small vial that appeared in her hand. The way she emptied its contents into one of the glasses. The careful stirring with her finger. This time, it wasn't powder. It was liquid, clear, odorless, dissolving instantly into the tea. My heart was racing, but my hands remained steady as I finished plating the food. Years of construction work had taught me to function under pressure, to keep working even when disaster loomed overhead. "Here we go," Sarah said, setting the glasses on the table. She placed mine in front of my usual chair, her own across from me. Just like before, she was careful to keep track of which was which. We sat down to eat. The pot roast was perfect, tender, flavorful, exactly the way Martha used to make it. But I barely tasted it. My attention was focused entirely on the glass of iced tea sitting inches from my right hand. "This is delicious, Dad," Sarah said, cutting her meat with surgical precision. "You really outdid yourself." "Your mother's recipe," I said. "I could never improve on perfection." Sarah smiled, but it was thin, strained. She kept glancing at my untouched glass, and I could see the tension building in her shoulders with each passing minute. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore. "Aren't you thirsty?" she asked, nodding toward my tea. "You usually drink something with dinner." "Of course," I said, reaching for the glass. My fingers wrapped around the cool surface, and I saw Sarah's pupils dilate slightly. Anticipation. I brought the glass halfway to my lips, then paused. You know what? I said, setting it back down. I just remembered I need to take my blood pressure medication. Doctor's orders. Take it right before meals for better absorption. Sarah's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Disappointment. Frustration. Then, forcing a smile. Of course, Dad. Your health comes first. I excused myself to the bathroom, where I'd hidden a different kind of insurance policy. A small digital voice recorder, the kind reporters use for interviews. I'd been recording our entire conversation, and now I added a time-stamped verbal note about what I'd observed. When I returned to the kitchen, Sarah was checking her phone again, that nervous energy radiating from her like heat from asphalt. Everything okay? I asked. Fine, she said quickly. Just work stuff. I picked up the glass again, watching her face carefully. This time, I took a sip. The tea tasted normal, sweet, with that slight bitter aftertaste of artificial flavoring I'd never liked. But underneath, there was something else. A faint metallic taste that didn't belong. I forced myself to take another sip, then set the glass down. Good tea, I said. Sarah nodded, but her eyes were locked on the glass, measuring how much I'd consumed. Not enough, apparently, because she kept encouraging me to drink more throughout the meal. 20 minutes passed. 30. I could see Sarah's anxiety building as nothing happened to me. Whatever she'd put in that tea was supposed to work by now, and my continued consciousness was clearly not part of her plan. Then I made my move. I'm feeling a bit lightheaded, I said, putting a hand to my forehead. Maybe I should lie down for a few minutes. Sarah's whole body tensed. Are you okay? Do you need anything? No, I'm sure it's nothing, I said, standing up slowly. Maybe just a quick nap. You don't mind cleaning up, do you? Of course not, Dad. You go rest. I walked toward my bedroom, but instead of lying down, I positioned myself where I could watch the kitchen through the cracked door. The camera would catch everything, but I wanted to see it with my own eyes. Sarah moved the moment she thought I was out of sight. She went straight to the dictionary on the counter, opening it with practiced ease. Her face lit up when she found the money. $12,000 in neat bundles. But she didn't take it. Not yet. Instead, she pulled out her phone and made a call. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught enough. Words like, tonight, finally, and, as planned. When she hung up, she was smiling, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her all day. Then she began cleaning up the dinner dishes, but with a strange sort of efficiency. She washed my glass thoroughly, dried it, and put it away in a cabinet I rarely used. The remaining iced tea went down the drain. Even the pitcher got a thorough washing. She was eliminating evidence. When she finished, Sarah came to check on me. I kept my eyes closed and my breathing deep, pretending to sleep. She stood in the doorway for a long time, just watching. Waiting. Finally, she whispered, "Goodbye, Dad." The front door closed with a soft click. I waited 5 more minutes, then got up and went to the kitchen window. Sarah's car was gone, but I noticed something else. A black sedan parked across the street that hadn't been there before. My blood went cold as I recognized the driver. Jake Morrison. Sarah's ex-husband. The man who'd supposedly cleaned her out in the divorce was sitting in a car across from my apartment, watching my building. The same man who worked as a pharmaceutical sales rep and would have easy access to all sorts of drugs. The same man who stood to benefit if Sarah inherited my money and they reconciled. That's when I realized this wasn't just about Sarah trying to kill me. This was bigger. More complicated. And infinitely more dangerous. I reached for my phone to call Ray Kowalski, but then stopped. If Jake was out there watching, if this was some kind of coordinated effort, I needed to be smarter about my next move. I needed to disappear. I had maybe 30 minutes before Sarah realized something was wrong. Whatever she'd put in that iced tea should have killed me by now, or at least incapacitated me enough that I wouldn't be able to call for help. When I didn't answer my phone later that evening, she'd come back to check on me. Find my body. Call 911 in tears. played the devastated daughter who'd arrived just too late to save her poor, sick father. The grieving daughter who would inherit everything. But I wasn't going to be here when she came back. I moved through my apartment like a man half my age, adrenaline overriding 7 decades of accumulated aches and pains. The cameras were still recording. I'd let them run until the batteries died, creating a complete record of everything that happened after I disappeared. First, I gathered the essentials. Cash from my wallet, medications, a change of clothes. The voice recorder was Sarah's confession. My phone, set to silent. The backup files from the cameras stored on a small SD card I could slip into my pocket. Then I did something that felt like dying. I scattered my blood around the apartment. Not real blood, I'm not that dramatic. But I'd thought this through during my years of watching crime shows with Martha. I used red food coloring mixed with corn syrup, a trick I'd learned from a special effects artist who'd worked on one of my construction sites. Applied sparingly to the kitchen floor, the bathroom doorframe, the living room carpet. Just enough to suggest a struggle. A man fighting for his life and losing. I even knocked over a lamp, scattered some papers, made it look like someone had ransacked the place looking for something valuable. The dictionary went back on the bookshelf, money still inside. That would be important later. My final act was the hardest. I took off my wedding ring, the simple gold band Martha had slipped onto my finger 48 years ago, and left it on the kitchen counter in a small pool of fake blood. The ring I'd never removed, not even during the worst construction jobs where jewelry could get you killed. If someone were to stage my murder, they'd take obvious valuables but might overlook something sentimental. Or maybe they'd remove it to make identification harder. Either way, that ring sitting there in the blood would tell a story. I slipped out through the building's service entrance, the one that led to the alley behind the dumpsters. Jake's sedan was still parked out front, but the driver would be watching the main entrance, not expecting a 73-year-old man to be sneaking out the back like some kind of spy. The November wind cut through my jacket as I made my way to the bus station 6 blocks away. I'd walked these streets for 5 years, but tonight they felt foreign, dangerous. Every shadow could hide a threat, every passing car might belong to someone hunting me. But I made it. The Greyhound station was perfect, anonymous, cash-friendly, full of people who minded their own business. I bought a ticket to Cleveland, not because I wanted to go there, but because it was the next bus leaving. I'd figure out my real destination once I was moving. As the bus pulled away from the station, I saw Sarah's car racing toward my neighborhood, probably responding to Jake's call that something was wrong. She was about to discover that her father had vanished, leaving behind only blood and signs of a struggle. The grieving daughter act would have to wait. The bus ride gave me 6 hours to think, to plan my next move. I'd been in tough spots before, construction accidents, business disputes that turned ugly, the financial crisis that nearly cost me everything in 2008. But this was different. This time, the threat was coming from inside my own family. I called Ray Kowalski from a payphone in Cleveland, using a voice I'd practiced during the bus ride, older, more confused, definitely distressed. Ray? Thank God you're there. Something's happened. Tommy? Where the hell are you? I've got 3 patrol cars at your apartment right now. There's blood everywhere, and... I know. I barely got out alive. I told him a carefully edited version of the truth. That I'd suspected Sarah might try again, so I'd been more careful this time. That I'd seen someone breaking into my apartment, someone I didn't recognize, and had managed to escape through the service entrance while they were ransacking the place. Why didn't you call me immediately? Ray asked. I was scared, I said, letting my voice shake slightly. I didn't know who I could trust. For all I know, they're watching the police station too. It wasn't entirely a lie. Jake's presence suggested this conspiracy went beyond just Sarah. Who else might be involved? Her coworkers at the law firm? Friends who knew about my money? Where are you now? Ray asked. Cleveland. I took the first bus out of town. I'm scared, Ray. Really scared. Okay, listen to me carefully. Don't come back yet. Let me work this scene, see what we can find. Give me your number and I'll call you in a few hours. After I hung up, I found a cheap motel near the bus station and checked in under a false name, Tom Martinez, close enough to my real name that I'd respond to it naturally, but different enough to avoid immediate detection. The room was exactly what you'd expect for $39 a night. Stained carpet, thin walls, a bed that creaked when you looked at it wrong. But it had cable TV, and that's what I needed. I spent the next several hours watching the news, looking for any mention of a missing person case in my hometown. Nothing on the 6 o'clock broadcast, but I caught a brief mention on the 11 o'clock news. Police are investigating the possible abduction of 73-year-old Thomas Rodriguez, who disappeared from his downtown apartment earlier today. Blood evidence suggests foul play, and family members say Rodriguez had recently mentioned feeling threatened by unknown individuals. Anyone with information is asked to contact authorities immediately. Family members. That would be Sarah, playing her role perfectly. The concerned daughter, cooperating with police, probably even crying on camera if they'd interview her. My phone rang at midnight. Ray Kowalski. Tommy, we've got a problem, he said without preamble. The blood at your apartment? It's not human. My heart stopped. What do you mean? Corn syrup and food coloring. Someone staged this whole thing. Either you did it yourself, or whoever took you wanted us to think you were dead without actually killing you. I forced confusion into my voice. That doesn't make sense. Why would someone fake my death? That's what we need to figure out. Tommy, I need you to be completely honest with me. Did you stage your own disappearance? Ray, you've known me for 20 years. Do I seem like the kind of man who'd pull a stunt like that? A long pause. No, he said finally. But these are some pretty sophisticated games being played. Whoever's behind this knows what they're doing. What did you find out about Sarah? Your daughter seems genuinely distraught. She's been at the station most of the evening, begging us to find you. If she's involved, she's one hell of an actress. Or she's panicking because her plan went sideways, I thought. Out loud, I said, what about security cameras? Did you check the building's surveillance system? That's the weird thing. The cameras in your building were all disabled sometime yesterday evening. Professional job, someone who knew what they were doing. Jake. Had to be. A pharmaceutical sales rep might not know about security systems, but he'd have connections to people who did. Ray, there's something else, I said. I've been thinking about this whole situation, and I remembered something. Sarah's ex-husband, Jake Morrison. He was parked across from my building yesterday. You're sure about that? Positive. I thought it was strange at the time, but didn't make the connection until now. I'll look into it. Meanwhile, stay put. Don't contact anyone else, don't use credit cards, don't do anything that might give away your location. If someone's really trying to kill you, they might be monitoring everything. After Ray hung up, I sat on the edge of that terrible motel bed and tried to process what I'd learned. Sarah was playing the grieving daughter perfectly, probably because she genuinely was upset, just not for the reasons everyone assumed. Her plan had been simple: poison me, inherit my money, reconcile with Jake, who'd probably been in on it from the beginning, and live happily ever after on my $600,000. But now I was missing instead of dead, which was almost worse from her perspective. A missing person investigation would involve financial audits, deep dives into family relationships, questions about who stood to benefit from my disappearance. All the scrutiny she'd been trying to avoid. I turned on the TV and flipped through channels until I found an old movie, something black and white with actors who'd been dead for decades. The familiar voices were comforting, a reminder of simpler times when good guys were good and bad guys were obvious. But as I watched those old stars move through their scripted lives, I realized something important. I wasn't the good guy in this story anymore. I was the villain. I'd staged my own disappearance, manipulated a police investigation, and was planning to destroy my daughter's life to save my own. The fact that she tried to kill me first didn't change the fundamental reality. I was about to become the kind of person who ruins lives. But as I thought about that reflection in the kitchen window, about the careful way Sarah had prepared my poison tea, about Jake sitting in his car like a vulture waiting for news of my death, I realized something else. Sometimes being the villain is the only way to survive. Tomorrow, I was going to start fighting back. Ray called me at 7 in the morning with news that made my blood run cold. "Jake Morrison's got an alibi," he said without preamble. "Solid. He was at work until 6 yesterday, then at a business dinner with 12 witnesses until after midnight. Restaurant receipts, credit card records, the works." I sat up in the motel bed, suddenly wide awake. "That's impossible. I saw him." "When exactly?" "Around 3 o'clock. Maybe 3:30. He was parked across from my building in a black sedan." "Tommy, Jake Morrison drives a red pickup truck. Has for the past 2 years, according to DMV records. And at 3:30 yesterday, he was in a sales meeting with the purchasing department at St. Mary's Hospital. I've got signed contracts with timestamps." My mind raced. If it wasn't Jake, then who had been watching my apartment? And why had I immediately assumed it was him? "Ray, I need you to do something for me. Check Sarah's finances going back 6 months. Look for any unusual deposits, payments, anything that doesn't fit her normal pattern." "Already on it." "But Tommy, I gotta ask, how do you know so much about investigative procedure? Most civilians wouldn't think to ask about financial records." I'd been dreading this question. "You remember Martha's brother, Detective Luis Hernandez? He used to tell stories at family dinners. Some of it stuck. It was true, mostly. Luis had been on the force for 30 years before retiring, and he'd shared plenty of war stories over Martha's Sunday pot roasts. But the real reason I knew so much was simpler. I'd been planning this for a week. "Okay," Ray said. "Stay put. I'll call you back when I know more." After he hung up, I walked to the motel's vending machine area and bought the worst coffee in human history for 75 cents. The bitter liquid helped me think, though it tasted like it had been brewed with motor oil. If Jake wasn't involved, then Sarah was either working alone or with someone else entirely. But who? Her coworkers at the law firm? An old friend? A new boyfriend I didn't know about? Or maybe, and this thought made my stomach clench, maybe I'd been wrong about everything. Maybe that reflection in the kitchen window hadn't shown what I thought it showed. Maybe Sarah really had been putting salt or pepper or some innocent seasoning into my soup, and I'd let paranoia turn a caring daughter into a would-be murderer. But then I remembered the taste of that iced tea. The metallic aftertaste that didn't belong. The way Sarah had insisted I drink more, her obvious disappointment when nothing happened to me. No. I hadn't imagined it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop running. We need to talk." Sarah had somehow gotten my number. I stared at the message for several minutes before responding. "Who is we?" The reply came back immediately. "Meet me at Mom's grave. Today at 2 p.m. Come alone." Martha's grave. Our private place, where we'd had some of our most important conversations over the past 5 years. Sarah's choice of location was smart, public enough to be safe, private enough to talk freely, and emotionally significant enough that I'd have trouble refusing. But it was also potentially a trap. I called Ray back. "I need you to do something, and you're not going to like it." "What now?" "Sarah wants to meet me at Riverside Cemetery at 2 o'clock. I'm going to do it, but I need backup." "Tommy, are you insane? If she really tried to kill you, then this is our chance to catch her. But I need you there, hidden, recording everything. If this goes wrong, I want evidence of what really happened. This is a terrible idea. Ray, I'm 73 years old. How many more chances am I going to get to find out the truth about my daughter?" He was quiet for a long moment. "All right. But we do this my way. You wear a wire, you follow my instructions exactly, and at the first sign of trouble, you walk away. Deal?" "Deal." I spent the bus ride back to my hometown going over what I wanted to say to Sarah. How do you confront your own child about attempted murder? What words do you use when the person who used to crawl into your bed during thunderstorms might be planning your funeral? Riverside Cemetery was exactly as I remembered it, rolling hills covered with weathered headstones, ancient oak trees providing shade for the living and the dead alike. Martha's grave was in the newer section, marked with a simple granite stone that read, Martha Elena Rodriguez, beloved wife and mother, 1951 to 2020. I'd visited every week for the first year after her death, then every month, then whenever the loneliness became unbearable. The groundskeepers knew me by name. Sarah was already there when I arrived, standing beside the headstone with red eyes and wrinkled clothes. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Dad, she said when she saw me approaching. Her voice broke on the word. Hello, Sarah. We stood there awkwardly for a moment, father and daughter separated by more than just a few feet of cemetery grass. In the distance, I could see Ray's unmarked car parked behind a maintenance shed, close enough to respond quickly but far enough away to avoid detection. I didn't know if you were dead or alive, Sarah said finally. When I saw the blood in your apartment, I thought I'd lost you too. But you knew I wasn't dead, didn't you? Her face went very still. What do you mean? The blood was fake, Sarah. Corn syrup and food coloring. Someone staged my disappearance to make it look like I'd been murdered. I don't understand. Neither do I. That's why we need to talk. Because either you're involved in something that's way over your head, or someone's playing games with both of us. Sarah sat down on the small stone bench beside Martha's grave, the one I'd had installed so I could sit comfortably during my visits. She looked fragile, breakable. Dad, I need to tell you something. About Sunday night. Here it comes, I thought. The confession. I put something in your tea, she said, not looking at me. But it wasn't what you think. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my voice steady. What was it? Sleeping pills. Ground up sleeping pills from my prescription. She finally looked up, tears streaming down her face. Dad, you've been having nightmares again. Calling out Mom's name in your sleep. I could hear it through the apartment walls when I visited. I stared at her. That's impossible. I live alone. The walls are thin, and Mrs. Chen next door is worried about you. She called me last week, said you've been screaming in the middle of the night. She was afraid you were having some kind of breakdown. Mrs. Chen. My elderly neighbor who'd always been friendly but never intrusive. I barely spoke to her beyond polite greetings in the hallway. So you decided to drug me? I was trying to help. Sarah's voice rose, then she caught herself and glanced around the cemetery. I thought if you could get one good night's sleep, really deep sleep, maybe the nightmares would stop. I was going to tell you what I'd done after you woke up, explain that we needed to get you some professional help. And the soup last Tuesday? Sarah looked genuinely confused. What soup? The chicken noodle soup. You brought it over, and I saw you put something in my bowl. Dad, I brought you soup, but I didn't put anything in it. You're scaring me. The wire Ray had fitted me with felt like it was burning against my skin. Everything Sarah was saying sounded reasonable, plausible. But I knew what I'd seen. Then explain, Jake, I said. Why was your ex-husband watching my apartment? Jake? Sarah's confusion seemed genuine. Dad, I haven't spoken to Jake in over a year. He moved to Phoenix after the divorce. What are you talking about? Phoenix. Not here. Not watching my building. Sarah, I need you to be completely honest with me. Has anyone approached you about my finances? Anyone asking questions about my will, my insurance, anything like that? Of course not. Dad, what's going on? You're talking like someone's trying to kill you. I studied her face, looking for any sign of deception. She looked exhausted, worried, and genuinely confused. Either she was the greatest actress who'd ever lived, or... Oh God! I whispered as the pieces began falling into place. Sarah, has anyone new come into your life recently? Someone who's been asking about me, about our family? Well, there's Marcus from work, but he's just... She stopped, her face going pale. Dad, you don't think... Tell me about Marcus. Marcus Webb. He's a new associate at the firm. He started asking me out about 2 months ago, and we've been seeing each other casually. He's been really interested in my family history, always asking questions about you and Mom. My blood went cold. What kind of questions? Normal things. What you did for work, where you lived, whether you were in good health. I thought he was just trying to get to know me better. Sarah, I need you to think very carefully. Has Marcus ever been to your apartment? Has he had access to your things, your prescription bottles? Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God! He was there Sunday afternoon, helping me get ready for dinner with you. I went to shower, and when I came out, he was in the kitchen. He said he was looking for a glass of water. The sleeping pills. Marcus had ground them up and given them to Sarah, probably telling her they were something harmless. She'd put them in my tea thinking she was helping me sleep, never knowing she was being used as an unwitting accomplice in attempted murder. Sarah, where is Marcus now? I don't know. He was supposed to call me yesterday, but I haven't heard from him. With everything that happened to you, I forgot about it. I pulled out my phone and called Ray. We've got a problem. The daughter's not our suspect. There's a third party involved. Marcus Webb works at Sarah's law firm. Hold on, Ray said. I could hear him typing. Marcus Webb, got it. Marcus Webb, age 34, hired by Brennan and Associates 2 months ago. Clean record, good references from his previous firm in Chicago. Ray, I need you to run a deeper check. Financial records, employment history, everything. And I need to know where he is right now. Working on it. Tommy, get out of there. If this Marcus is our guy and he knows you're alive, that cemetery could be. The shot came from somewhere in the trees behind Martha's headstone. The bullet shattered the granite marker, sending stone fragments flying. Get down! I shouted, tackling Sarah behind the stone bench as another shot rang out. Ray's unmarked car roared to life, racing across the cemetery grass toward us. But the shooter was already moving, disappearing into the wooded area that bordered the cemetery's eastern edge. Stay down, I told Sarah, who was crying and shaking beneath me. Don't move until the police say it's safe. But even as I held my daughter against the cold ground, listening to Ray coordinate with backup units over his radio, I was thinking about Marcus Webb. About how carefully he'd planned this whole operation. He'd identified a target with money, me. Found a way to get close through my daughter. Manipulated Sarah into becoming an unwitting accomplice. And when his first attempt failed because I'd switched bowls, he'd improvised. The fake blood, the stage disappearance. The mysterious man watching my building who looked like Jake but wasn't. All of it designed to flush me out, to force me into a situation where he could finish the job. Marcus Webb was a professional. This wasn't his first time. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a terrible thought was forming. If Marcus was professional enough to stage an elaborate murder plot, professional enough to manipulate my daughter for months, professional enough to nearly fool a police investigation, then what were the chances that Marcus Webb was even his real name? As sirens wailed in the distance, and crime scene techs began setting up their equipment around Martha's shattered grave marker, I realized that everything I thought I knew about this situation was wrong. My daughter wasn't trying to kill me. But someone definitely was. And they were very, very good at it. Ray found me in the hospital waiting room at 11 that night, looking like he'd aged 5 years and 5 hours. How's Sarah? He asked, settling into the plastic chair beside me. Sedated. Shock, mostly, but she'll be okay. I rubbed my eyes, feeling every one of my 73 years. What did you find out about Marcus Webb? That's the million-dollar question. Marcus Webb exists, but he's like a ghost. Perfect credit score, clean background check, solid employment history. Too perfect. What do you mean? Ray pulled out a manila folder thick with printouts. I mean his entire identity was constructed. The Marcus Webb who works at your daughter's law firm has been Marcus Webb for exactly 18 months. Before that, there's no trace of him anywhere. Witness protection? No. I checked with the marshals. This is something else entirely. Professional identity construction. The kind of thing that costs serious money and requires serious connections. I thought about that morning in Cleveland, about the fake blood in my apartment, about how carefully everything had been planned. He's done this before. That's my guess. I'm running his prints through every database I can access, but I'm betting we won't find anything. If this guy's as professional as he seems, he's never been caught. What about the law firm? How did he get hired there? Legitimate credentials, glowing references from a firm in Chicago. I called them. They remember Marcus well, said he was an excellent employee for 2 years before moving here for family reasons. Let me guess. The Chicago firm doesn't exist anymore. Oh, it exists. But the partners who supposedly gave those references? They've never heard of Marcus Webb. We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the familiar sounds of a hospital at night. Somewhere down the hall, a machine was beeping steadily. The sound reminded me of Martha's final weeks, when she'd been hooked up to so many monitors that I could barely find her under all the wires. Ray, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. How much danger is Sarah in? I don't know, he said, which scared me more than any elaborate theory would have. If Marcus's plan was to kill you and frame her for it, then her value as a patsy is gone now that we know the truth. But if he's worried about her identifying him... He didn't need to finish the thought. What about protection? Can you put her somewhere safe? I can try, but Tommy, we're dealing with someone who's been planning this for months. Someone with resources and connections we don't understand. If he really wants to get to her... My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your daughter is very pretty when she sleeps. Room 314. The blood drained from my face. He's here. In the hospital. Ray was already moving, calling for backup while we ran toward the elevators. But I was thinking like a contractor again, visualizing the hospital's layout, considering all the ways someone could get in and out without being seen. Service elevators. Stairwells. Delivery entrances. A professional would have mapped them all. Room 314 was empty when we got there. Sarah's bed was unmade but vacant, her belongings gone. The nurse on duty said she'd been transferred to a private room on another floor for security reasons. But there was no record of any transfer. He has her, I said, my voice sounding strange and distant in my own ears. Ray was coordinating with hospital security, checking surveillance footage, following protocol. But I knew it was too late. Marcus had planned this too carefully, had too much of a head start. My phone buzzed again. Riverside Park. East entrance. 1 hour. Come alone, or she dies. Ray. I saw it, he said grimly. Tommy, we can set up a perimeter, have snipers in position. No. He's too smart for that. If he sees any sign of police presence, he'll kill her. So what do you suggest? I was quiet for a long moment, thinking about everything that had led to this point. My paranoia about Sarah. The switch bowls. The fake blood and staged disappearance. All of it had been Marcus's plan from the beginning, and I'd played my part perfectly. I go alone, I said. But not the way he expects. Riverside Park at midnight was a different world from the pleasant daytime space where families had picnics and children fed ducks. The shadows were deeper, the familiar paths treacherous in the darkness. I approached from the west entrance, not the east where Marcus was expecting me. It took me 20 minutes to work my way through the park to a position where I could observe the meeting spot without being seen. Marcus was there, sitting on a bench near the pond. Even in the moonlight, I could see he was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-30s, athletic build, expensive clothes. He looked like a successful businessman, not a killer. Sarah was beside him on the bench, very still. Too still. I worked my way closer, using trees and landscaping for cover. My construction background helped here too. I'd always been good at moving through spaces, understanding sight lines and blind spots. When I was close enough to hear voices, I stopped and listened. Your father is smarter than I gave him credit for, Marcus was saying, his voice conversational. The way he switched those bowls, staged his own disappearance. Very impressive for an amateur. Sarah didn't respond. I could see why now. Her hands were zip-tied behind her back, and there was duct tape over her mouth. She was conscious but terrified. The plan was so simple, Marcus continued. Seduce the daughter, gain access to the target, arrange an accident that looked natural. Your father's age and health history would have made a heart attack very believable. He stood up, pacing a few steps away from the bench. That's when I saw the gun in his hand. But then he had to get clever. Had to start paying attention, asking questions. Do you know how much trouble he's caused me? I was close enough now. Maybe 30 feet, with good cover behind a large oak tree. But I needed to get closer if I was going to have any chance of helping Sarah. The funny thing is, Marcus said, I actually like your father. He's tough, resourceful, thinks on his feet. In another life, we might have been friends. He turned back towards Sarah, and I saw my chance. While his attention was focused on her, I moved from the oak to a smaller tree, then to a landscaping boulder, getting within 20 feet of the bench. But business is business. Thomas Rodriguez has $600,000 that I need, and the only way to get it is through his death and your inheritance. Nothing personal. That's when Sarah did something that probably saved both our lives. She threw herself sideways off the bench, rolling away from Marcus and giving me a clear shot at him. Not with a gun, I didn't have one. But with 73 years of rage and desperation and a father's love for his child. I came out of the shadows like a man half my age, tackling Marcus around the waist and driving him to the ground. The gun went flying, disappearing somewhere in the darkness. We rolled across the grass, grappling for position. He was younger and stronger, but I was fighting for my daughter's life. And I'd spent 50 years working construction, developing the kind of functional strength that doesn't fade easily. I managed to get on top of him, my hands around his throat. But Marcus was better trained for this kind of violence. He bucked his hips, threw me off balance, and suddenly I was the one on my back with his hands reaching for my neck. That's when Sarah, hands still zip-tied behind her back but mouth free from the duct tape she'd somehow worked loose, screamed at the top of her lungs. The sound echoed across the park, and Marcus froze for just a second. Long enough for me to bring my knee up hard between his legs. He doubled over in pain, and I scrambled toward where I thought the gun had landed. My hands swept through the grass desperately until I found it, cold metal slick with dew. When I turned around, Marcus was on his feet again, but Ray Kowalski was emerging from the trees with his service weapon drawn. Police! Don't move! Marcus raised his hands slowly, that businessman's smile never leaving his face. Officer, thank goodness you're here. This man attacked me? I was just trying to help his daughter. Save it, Ray said. We've got the whole thing on audio. That's when I realized Ray had been listening through the wire I was still wearing. He'd heard everything Marcus had said about the plan, about needing my money, about arranging my death. As Ray cuffed Marcus and read him his rights, I untied Sarah and held her while she cried against my shoulder. She smelled like fear and hospital antiseptic, but she was alive. I'm so sorry, Dad, she whispered. I'm so sorry I doubted you. You didn't know, I said, stroking her hair like I had when she was little. He fooled all of us. But even as I comforted my daughter, I was thinking about what Marcus had said. About needing my money, about this being business, not personal. $600,000 was a lot of money to most people, but it wasn't enough to justify the elaborate, months-long operation Marcus had mounted. The fake identity, the careful manipulation, the professional-level planning. This wasn't about my inheritance. This was about something bigger. The interrogation room at the police station smelled like burnt coffee and broken dreams. I sat behind the one-way mirror, watching Ray question the man who tried to destroy my family. Marcus Webb, if that was even his real name, had been sitting calmly for 3 hours, saying nothing beyond requesting a lawyer. But his eyes, His eyes kept drifting to the clock on the wall, like he was waiting for something. "He's stalling," I said to Ray during a break. "Professional killers don't usually worry about lawyers. Maybe he's not as professional as we thought." "No, he is. Look at how he's sitting, relaxed, controlled, like he's done this before. He's buying time for a reason." Ray studied the man through the glass. "What kind of reason?" "I don't know. But I don't think this is over." I was right. At 2:17 a.m., Marcus's lawyer arrived. Not some overworked public defender or local criminal attorney, but a woman in a $1,000 suit who introduced herself as Catherine Morrison from a white shoe firm in New York City. "My client will not be answering any questions," she announced before even sitting down. "And I'll need to speak with him privately." While they were meeting, Ray pulled me aside. "Tommy," I ran the lawyer's name. "Catherine Morrison is real, works for one of the most expensive law firms in the country. The kind of place that charges $500 an hour just to return phone calls. Who's paying for it? That's what I'd like to know. Because it sure as hell isn't Marcus Webb on a paralegal's salary." 20 minutes later, Catherine Morrison emerged from the interrogation room looking satisfied. "My client is prepared to make a statement." We gathered around the recording equipment as Marcus finally spoke. "My real name is Michael Brennan," he said, his voice steady and professional. "I'm a former insurance investigator who now works as a private contractor for various corporate clients." "What kind of contracting?" Ray asked. "Problem resolution. Mostly financial disputes, inheritance issues, cases where traditional legal remedies aren't sufficient." "You mean murder for hire?" "I prefer permanent solutions to temporary problems." The casual way he said it made my skin crawl. This wasn't a desperate criminal or a crime of passion. This was a businessman discussing quarterly earnings. "Who hired you to kill Thomas Rodriguez?" Ray pressed. "I'm afraid that information is protected by attorney-client privilege." "You're not an attorney." "No, but my employer is. And the work product doctrine covers investigations conducted at the direction of counsel." Catherine Morrison nodded approvingly. These two had rehearsed this. Ray tried a different approach. "How many people have you killed, Michael?" "I've never killed anyone, detective. I arrange accidents. Heart attacks, strokes, falls downstairs. Natural deaths that happen to occur at convenient times." "What about tonight?" "You had a gun." "Self-defense. Mr. Rodriguez attacked me while I was trying to help his daughter." It was masterfully done. Without evidence of previous murders, and given Michael's careful methods, there probably wasn't any. The most they could charge him with was kidnapping and assault. Maybe attempted murder, but his lawyer would argue it down. After the session ended, Ray and I walked to the parking garage in frustrated silence. "He's going to walk," Ray said finally. "Maybe. But he told us something important. He said his employer is an attorney, and that this was about an inheritance issue." "Your inheritance?" "That's just it. I don't think it is. $600,000 isn't enough money to justify hiring a professional killer. There has to be something else." I spent the rest of that night in Sarah's hospital room, watching her sleep and thinking about everything that had happened. The attack at the cemetery, the professional identity construction, the expensive lawyer who'd appeared within hours of Michael's arrest. Someone with serious money and legal connections wanted me dead. But why? The answer came to me at dawn, as I was watching the sunrise through the hospital window. The house. Not my current apartment, but the family house I'd sold after Martha died. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, sitting on 2 acres of prime real estate just outside the city center. I'd sold it for $400,000, thinking I'd gotten a good deal in a soft market. But what if it hadn't been a soft market? What if the buyer had known something I didn't? I called Ray from the hospital cafeteria. "I need you to look up something for me. The house I sold 5 years ago, 1247 Oak Ridge Drive. Find out who bought it and what they did with it." "Tommy, it's 6 in the morning." "Ray, please. I think I know why someone wants me dead." 3 hours later, he called back with information that made my blood run cold. Your house was purchased by Meridian Development Corporation for $400,000. 6 months later, the city announced plans for a new commercial district in that area. Your old property is now worth approximately $2.3 million. Meridian Development. I'd heard that name before, but couldn't place it. Ray, who owns Meridian Development? That's where it gets interesting. It's a subsidiary of a larger holding company, which is owned by another company, which is controlled by a trust. But if you dig deep enough through all the corporate layers, you eventually get to the real owner. Who? Thomas Morrison. The name hit me like a physical blow. Morrison. Catherine Morrison, Michael's lawyer. It couldn't be a coincidence. Ray, I need to know everything about Thomas Morrison. Everything. Already working on it. Tommy, if this guy bought your house for pennies on the dollar because he had inside information about the development project, and if he's worried that you might find out and sue him, he'd have motive to kill me before I could challenge the sale. Exactly. And if you're dead, the statute of limitations runs out, and he gets to keep his illegal profits. I thought about my daughter, sedated and vulnerable in her hospital bed. About Michael Brennan, who was probably going to make bail within 24 hours. About Thomas Morrison, who had enough money to buy judges and hire killers. Ray, how long before Michael gets out? His arraignment is this afternoon. With his lawyer and his clean record, probably by evening. And then he comes after Sarah. We can put her in protective custody. For how long? A week? A month? Ray, this Thomas Morrison has $2.3 million in illegal profits at stake. He's not going to give up because we arrested one of his contractors. I hung up and walked back to Sarah's room, where she was finally awake and picking at a breakfast tray. Dad, you look terrible, she said. When's the last time you slept? I'll sleep when this is over. Sarah, I need to ask you something important. When you were dating Michael, did he ever ask about the family house? About when I sold it, who bought it, anything like that? She frowned, thinking. Actually, yes. He seemed really interested in real estate, always asking about property values and development projects. He said he was thinking about investing. Did you tell him about the Oak Ridge house? I might have mentioned it. Why? I explained what Ray had discovered about Meridian Development and Thomas Morrison. Sarah's face went pale as the implication sank in. So this was never about your inheritance, she said. It was about covering up fraud. Exactly. And Sarah, there's something else. Michael is going to make bail today, and when he does, he's going to try to finish the job. What do you mean? I mean you're the only witness who can connect him to me, who can testify about his months-long plan to gain access to our family. As long as you're alive, you're a threat to Thomas Morrison's secret. Sarah gripped my hand tightly. What are we going to do? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw Martha's strength in her eyes. The same determination that had gotten my wife through nursing school while raising a toddler. The same fierce love that had held our family together through 50 years of ups and downs. We're going to do something Michael and his boss won't expect, I said. We're going to fight back. If you've ever been in a situation where running away wasn't an option, where the only choice was to stand and fight against impossible odds, then you know exactly how I felt in that moment. Hit that like button because what I did next was either brilliant or completely insane. I was about to turn the hunters into the hunted. The plan came to me while I was watching Sarah sleep that afternoon, her face peaceful despite the chaos surrounding our lives. For months, Michael Brennan had been studying us, learning our routines, our weaknesses, our vulnerabilities. Now it was time to turn the tables. I called Ray from the hospital parking garage, where I knew our conversation wouldn't be overheard. How much do you trust me? I asked. Tommy, after the past week, I'm not sure I trust my own shadow. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that Michael is going to make bail tonight, and the first thing he's going to do is try to eliminate the witnesses. That means Sarah, and probably me too. So we put you both in protective custody. No. That's playing defense, and defense doesn't win against professionals. We need to go on offense. I outlined my plan. It was risky, probably illegal, and definitely dangerous. But it was the only way to get Thomas Morrison and his hired killer before they got us. You're insane, Ray said when I finished. Maybe. But I'm also right. This is our only shot. Ray was quiet for a long moment. What do you need from me? Access to Michael's personal effects, and a favor from someone in the DA's office. Tommy, if this goes wrong. If this goes wrong, Sarah and I are dead anyway. At least this way, we go down fighting. Michael Brennan made bail at 6:30 p.m., just as I'd predicted. Catherine Morrison paid the $500,000 bond in cash, which told me everything I needed to know about Thomas Morrison's resources. But Michael didn't know that I was watching from across the street, or that Ray had planted a GPS tracker in his cell phone during the booking process. We followed him to a luxury hotel downtown, the kind of place that charged $300 a night for rooms that business travelers expense to their companies. Michael checked in under yet another fake name, but we had his room number. At 9 p.m., I called him. Hello, Michael. There was a pause, then that familiar businessman's voice. Mr. Rodriguez. I was hoping we could talk. I'm sure you were. Room 1247, right? Nice choice. High floor, good view, multiple exits. Very professional. Another pause. How did you? The same way I figured out who's really behind this. Thomas Morrison, Meridian Development, the Oak Ridge House. I know everything. Then you know you can't win. Mr. Morrison has resources you can't imagine. Maybe. But I have something he doesn't. What's that? Nothing left to lose. Meet me at the construction site on Elm Street in 1 hour. Come alone. Mr. Rodriguez, I think you're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was trusting my daughter to a snake. 1 hour, Michael. Or I go to the FBI with everything I know about Morrison's real estate fraud. I hung up before he could respond. The construction site on Elm Street was a 30-story office building going up in the heart of downtown. I'd worked on projects like it for decades, knew every phase of construction, every safety protocol, every potential hazard. More importantly, I knew the night security guard was my old foreman Pete Kowalski, Ray's uncle, who owed me more favors than I could count. Tommy Rodriguez, Pete said when I showed up at the trailer that served as the site office. What brings you out here on a night like this? I need to borrow your hard hat and toolbox, Pete. And maybe use the site for a private meeting. Pete studied my face in the harsh fluorescent light of the trailer. This about that trouble you've been having? Ray mentioned something. It's about finishing it. How long you need? Hour. Maybe 2. Pete handed me a hard hat and a belt with basic tools. Site's yours. Just try not to get yourself killed, the insurance paperwork's a nightmare. I spent the next 40 minutes preparing. Construction sites are dangerous places even in daylight with full crews and safety protocols. At night, with minimal lighting and no backup, they can be death traps. Unless you know what you're doing. I positioned myself on the 20th floor, high enough to control the situation, low enough to have multiple escape routes. The elevator was disabled for safety reasons, so anyone wanting to reach me would have to use the construction stairs. Lots of opportunities for accidents on construction stairs. Michael arrived exactly on time, which told me he was taking this seriously. I watched from above as he made his way through the site, moving with the careful precision of someone who understood danger. Mr. Rodriguez, he called when he reached the 20th floor. I'm here. I stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, staying far enough away to avoid any sudden moves. Hello, Michael. This is an interesting choice of venue, he said, looking around at the exposed steel beams and temporary flooring. Very dramatic. I thought you'd appreciate it. Lots of ways for old men to have accidents on construction sites. Is that why you're here? To threaten me? I'm here to make you an offer. Michael laughed. You're going to offer me money? Mr. Rodriguez, I'm being paid more for this job than you made in your entire career. Not money. Information. That got his attention. What kind of information? The kind that could save your life. You see, Michael, you made a mistake. You assumed Thomas Morrison was your client, but he's not. He's just the middleman. I could see the confusion in his eyes. What are you talking about? Tell me something. How did Morrison contact you? Through normal channels, or did someone recommend you to him? Michael was quiet for a moment. Someone recommended me. And did that someone mention that this job came with a built-in cleanup clause? Cleanup clause? The part where Morrison eliminates the contractor after the job is done. Can have loose ends, especially loose ends who know about multimillion-dollar fraud schemes. I could see the doubt creeping into his expression. You're lying. Am I? Think about it, Michael. You're the only person who can connect Morrison to my murder. You're the only one who knows about his real estate fraud. What happens to professional killers when they become liabilities? Michael took a step closer, and I saw his hand move toward his jacket. Even if that's true, it doesn't change anything. I have a contract to fulfill. And if I can prove Morrison's planning to kill you after you kill me? How? I pulled out my phone and played a recording. Ray's voice, slightly distorted to sound like Thomas Morrison. The Rodriguez job needs to be completed by the end of the week. And Michael? After it's done, we'll need to discuss a permanent retirement package for your services. Can't have any loose ends in an operation this sensitive. It wasn't Morrison's real voice. Ray had done his best impression based on phone recordings we'd obtained through a contact at the DA's office. But it was convincing enough to plant the seed of doubt. That could be faked, Michael said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. Could be. But are you willing to bet your life on it? I could see him thinking, calculating odds the way professionals do. What are you proposing? Simple. You walk away from this job, disappear back to whatever hole you crawled out of, and I don't pursue the real estate fraud. Morrison gets away with his illegal profits, you get away with your life, and my daughter and I get to live in peace. And if I refuse? Then you kill me, collect your fee from Morrison, and find out the hard way whether that recording was real or fake. Michael was quiet for several minutes, staring out at the city lights below us. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. You know, Mr. Rodriguez, I actually do respect you. This whole week, you've been thinking 3 moves ahead, staying 1 step ahead of a professional. That takes intelligence and courage. Is that a yes? That's a let me make a phone call. He pulled out his cell phone and dialed a number. Mr. Morrison? It's Michael. We have a problem. I couldn't hear Morrison's side of the conversation, but I could read Michael's face. And what I saw there told me everything I needed to know. I see, Michael said finally. And this was always part of the plan. More conversation. Michael's expression grew darker. Well then, I guess we have nothing more to discuss. He hung up and looked at me with something that might have been admiration. Congratulations, Mr. Rodriguez. It seems you were right about the cleanup clause. Morrison just informed me that my services are no longer required, and that I should consider our contract permanently terminated. What does that mean? Michael smiled, but it wasn't the businessman's smile I'd seen before. This one was cold, predatory. It means Thomas Morrison just made the biggest mistake of his life. Because now this is personal. And that's when I realized my plan had worked better than I'd hoped. I'd turned Michael Brennan from an enemy into an ally. Now we just had to survive long enough to use him. What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about justice, revenge, and the price of survival. Michael Brennan and I sat in an all-night diner at 2 a.m., looking like the most unlikely partners in the history of crime. A 73-year-old retired construction worker and a professional killer, bonding over bad coffee and shared betrayal. Morrison's problem, Michael explained, cutting into a piece of apple pie that looked like it had been sitting under heat lamps since the Clinton administration, is that he thinks like a businessman. Everything's about cost-benefit analysis, risk management, maximizing profits. And that's bad because? Because he doesn't understand that some things aren't about money. When you betray someone in my line of work, it becomes personal. And personal debts get paid in blood, not cash. I studied the man across from me. Without the facade of Marcus Webb the paralegal, Michael Brennan was something else entirely. Dangerous, focused, and now thoroughly motivated to destroy Thomas Morrison. What did he say on the phone? I asked. That the Rodriguez job was getting too complicated, drawing too much police attention. He was concerned about exposure and wanted to restructure our arrangement. Meaning? Meaning he wanted me dead. He already had someone in place to handle that particular task. My blood went cold. Someone else? How many killers does this guy have on payroll? Apparently more than I knew. Morrison runs what you might call a boutique assassination service. High-end clients, complex jobs, premium prices. I thought I was his only contractor, but it seems I was just one of many. The waitress refilled our coffee cups without being asked, the kind of automatic efficiency that comes from 30 years of night shifts and broken dreams. She looked like she'd seen everything the world had to offer and been disappointed by most of it. So what's the plan? I asked after she'd moved on to terrorize other customers. Simple. We destroy Thomas Morrison before he destroys us. And how exactly do we do that? Michael smiled, and for the first time, it looked genuine. The same way you destroyed my operation. We turn his strengths against him. Over the next 2 hours, Michael laid out Morrison's entire organization. It was bigger than I'd imagined, a network of lawyers, private investigators, corrupt officials, and freelance killers that stretched across multiple states. Morrison specializes in inheritance disputes, Michael explained. Rich clients who want inconvenient relatives eliminated before they can challenge wills, claim assets, or expose family secrets. The beauty of his system is that it looks completely legitimate from the outside. How does it work? Client comes to Morrison's law firm with a civil matter, usually some kind of family dispute over money. Morrison does his research, identifies the target, then subcontracts the actual work to people like me. The client pays legal fees for representation, never knowing their money is funding a murder. And Morrison keeps his hands clean. Exactly. If we get caught, we're just criminals. There's no connection back to him or his clients. Perfect deniability. I thought about my own situation, how carefully Michael had constructed his false identity, how he'd spent months gaining Sarah's trust, how professional the entire operation had been. How many people has he killed? I don't know exact numbers, but I've been working for him for 3 years, averaging about 4 jobs per year. And I'm just one contractor. The mathematics of it made me sick. Dozens of people, maybe hundreds, killed for money they'd never even know existed. Michael, there's something I need to know. When you were dating Sarah, did you actually care about her at all? He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup like it might contain answers to questions he'd never asked himself. I tried not to, he said finally. It's easier when you don't see targets as human beings. But your daughter, she's genuine in a way most people aren't. Kind, funny, trusting. In another life, under different circumstances. But you still would have killed me. Yes. Because that's what I do. What I am. He looked up at me, and I saw something unexpected in his eyes, regret. Until Morrison decided I was expendable. My phone buzzed with a text from Ray. Sarah's asking about you. Where are you? I showed the message to Michael. I need to get back to the hospital. That's not safe. If Morrison has other contractors, they'll be watching your daughter. Then what do you suggest? We end this tonight. All of it. I stared at him. You mean kill Morrison? I mean we take down his entire operation. Morrison, his clients, his network of killers. Everything. How? Michael pulled out a small device that looked like a flash drive. Insurance policy. Every contractor in Morrison's organization gets one of these when they're hired. It contains complete records of all our jobs, dates, locations, methods, payments. Morrison's way of keeping us in line, Mutual assured destruction. Exactly. If we ever try to expose him, he releases our records and we all go to prison for murder. But if something happens to us, the records go public anyway. Not public. But they go to someone who can use them. Law enforcement, media, whoever we designate as our insurance beneficiary. I was beginning to understand. And you designated someone? I designated 3 people, actually. A reporter at the Washington Post, an FBI agent I worked with years ago, and a hacker who specializes in exposing corporate corruption. If I don't check in with a specific code every 72 hours, all 3 get copies of everything. When did you last check in? Michael looked at his watch. About 60 hours ago. We had 12 hours before Michael's insurance policy triggered automatically. 12 hours to either resolve this situation or watch it explode into a national scandal that would destroy dozens of lives, including Sarah's and mine. There's another option, Michael said quietly. I could check in, reset the timer, and we could just walk away. You and Sarah disappear, I disappear, Morrison keeps his empire, and everyone lives their lives. Except for all the people he'll kill in the future. Except for them. I thought about Martha, about the values she tried to instill in our daughter. About right and wrong, about standing up to bullies, about the responsibility we all have to protect the innocent. No, I said. We finish this. Michael nodded like he'd expected that answer. Then we need to move fast. Morrison will have realized by now that I'm not dead, which means he'll be implementing contingency plans. What kind of contingency plans? The kind that involve eliminating all witnesses, destroying all evidence, and disappearing into whatever hole billionaire criminals disappear into when things go bad. We left the diner as the sun was beginning to rise over the city, 2 men united by circumstance and a shared enemy. Michael had given me his word that Sarah would be safe, and somehow, despite everything, I believed him. But as we drove toward what might be our final confrontation with Thomas Morrison, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was making a deal with the devil. Maybe I was. But sometimes the devil is on your side. And sometimes that's the only chance you get. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the promise of a new day. But I knew that for some of us, this might be the last sunrise we'd ever see. If you've ever had to choose between your safety and doing what's right, you know exactly how I felt driving toward that final showdown. The comments below are probably full of people telling me I should have just run, should have protected my family first, and let someone else worry about justice. Maybe they're right. But I couldn't live with myself knowing that Morrison would keep killing innocent people while I hid in some witness protection program. Sometimes you have to stand up and fight, even when the odds are impossible. Sometimes that's the only way to live with yourself. Thomas Morrison lived in a fortress. That was my first thought as we approached his estate in the hills outside the city. 20-foot walls topped with razor wire. Security cameras every 50 feet. Armed guards at the main gate who looked like they'd been recruited from private military contractors. He's paranoid, Michael observed, studying the compound through binoculars. But paranoid people make mistakes. We were positioned on a ridge overlooking Morrison's property, hidden in the trees like hunters stalking prey. Which, I suppose, is exactly what we were. What kind of mistakes? They focus so much on external threats that they forget about internal ones. Michael pulled out his phone and made a call. This is Michael Brennan. I need to speak with Thomas Morrison immediately. I could hear the voice on the other end, tinny through the phone's speaker. Mr. Brennan, Mr. Morrison was under the impression that your contract had been terminated. It has. That's why I need to speak with him. I have a proposition. A long pause. Hold, please. While we waited, I watched the guards at the gate. Professional, alert, but following predictable patterns. Every 15 minutes, one would walk the perimeter while the other monitored the cameras. Like clockwork. Morrison, came the voice through the phone. Thomas. We need to talk. I was under the impression our business relationship was concluded. It is. But I have something you want, and you have something I need. I'm listening. Rodriguez is still alive. He's with me right now, as a matter of fact. And he has evidence of your real estate fraud that could put you away for a very long time. I could hear Morrison's sharp intake of breath. What do you want? Safe passage out of the country for both of us, plus $5 million. In exchange, Rodriguez keeps his mouth shut about Oak Ridge Drive, and I forget about our recent misunderstanding. You're in no position to make demands, Michael. Actually, I'm in a perfect position. See, I have an insurance policy. If anything happens to me, certain information gets released to certain people. Information about all the jobs I've done for you over the past 3 years. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. When Morrison spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. Meet me at the house in 1 hour. Come alone. Rodriguez comes with me. He's not leaving my sight until we have a deal. Fine. But if this is some kind of setup. Thomas, if this was a setup, you'd already be dead. After Michael hung up, we spent the next 40 minutes finalizing our plan. It was insane, desperate, and probably suicidal. But it was also the only chance we had to end this thing once and for all. You understand what we're walking into? Michael asked as we made our way down the ridge toward Morrison's estate. A trap. Definitely a trap. Morrison's not going to let us walk out of there alive, deal or no deal. Then why are we doing this? Because sometimes the only way to spring a trap is from the inside. The guards at the gate searched us thoroughly but professionally, confiscating Michael's gun and the knife I'd brought from my construction toolkit. They left us with nothing but our clothes and our wits. Which was exactly what we'd expected. Morrison's house was everything you'd imagine a criminal mastermind's lair to be: marble floors, priceless artwork, floor-to-ceiling windows that offered spectacular views of the city below. The kind of place that screamed money and power. Thomas Morrison himself was surprisingly ordinary. Medium height, graying hair, expensive suit that couldn't quite disguise the soft belly of a man who'd spent too many years behind a desk. He looked like any other successful attorney, which I suppose was the point. Mr. Rodriguez, he said, extending a hand I didn't shake. I'm sorry we're meeting under such circumstances. Are you sorry you tried to have me killed, or sorry you got caught? Morrison smiled thinly. I'm sorry you've put us all in this unfortunate situation. We were standing in what Morrison probably called his study. Leather-bound books, oak desk, oil paintings of hunting scenes. 3 other men in suits stood around the room's perimeter, trying to look like lawyers but fooling no one. More contractors. More killers. Let's get down to business, Morrison said, settling behind his desk like a king on his throne. Michael tells me you have evidence of some alleged impropriety regarding a property transaction. Alleged? I laughed. You bought my house for $400,000 when you knew it was about to be worth $2.3 million. That's not alleged. That's documented fraud. Prove it. I pulled out a manila folder Ray had prepared for me, filled with property records, zoning documents, and city planning reports. It's all here. The timeline of your purchase, the zoning variance applications that were filed 2 weeks later, the development permits that were approved before the public comment period even ended. Morrison barely glanced at the documents. Circumstantial at best. Any good lawyer could get this thrown out of court. Maybe. But any good reporter could make it front-page news. Especially if they had testimony from one of your contractors about how the whole operation worked. Which brings us to Michael's insurance policy, Morrison said, turning his attention to my unlikely ally. Tell me about this supposed evidence you've collected. Every job, Thomas. Names, dates, methods, payments. 3 years of detailed records, all stored in a secure location with instructions to release everything if I don't check in regularly. And when did you last check in? Michael looked at his watch. About 4 hours ago. Morrison nodded to one of his fake lawyers, who stepped forward with what looked like a tablet computer. Show me, Morrison said. Show you what? The insurance policy. Prove it exists. Michael hesitated for just a moment, long enough for me to realize we just walked into the real trap. It doesn't exist, does it? Morrison continued. Oh, I'm sure you have some records, some evidence of our business relationship. But this automatic release system? This dead man's switch? Pure fiction. Thomas. You see, Michael, the problem with insurance policies is that they only work if the other party believes they exist. And I stopped believing in your policy about the time you started working with my target instead of eliminating him. Morrison pressed a button on his desk, and I heard the distinctive sound of doors being locked electronically. We were trapped. The truth is, Morrison continued, you're both going to die here today. Mr. Rodriguez will have a heart attack, the stress of recent events, his age, very believable. And Michael will unfortunately be killed while attempting to rob my home, probably by one of my security guards who will be hailed as a hero. You think you can get away with this? Mr. Rodriguez, I've been getting away with this for 15 years. 2 more bodies won't make any difference. That's when Michael smiled. Actually, Thomas, there's something you don't know about insurance policies. What's that? Sometimes they don't depend on the policyholder staying alive. Michael pulled something from his pocket, not a weapon the guards had missed, but a small electronic device about the size of a garage door opener. This is a dead man's switch, he said. Not for releasing information, but for something much more immediate. Morrison's face went pale. What are you talking about? While you were having us searched at the gate, this little device was recording everything. Every word you've said, every confession you've made, every detail about your 15-year murder spree. And if I don't press this button every 60 seconds, the recording gets transmitted to the FBI, the state police, and 3 different news organizations. I finished, finally understanding Michael's real plan. Morrison lunged for the device, but Michael was faster. The button clicked, and I heard a soft chime from the device. Timer reset, Michael said cheerfully. We've got another 60 seconds to chat about your criminal empire. You're bluffing. Am I? Tell you what, let's wait 59 more seconds and find out. The next minute was the longest of my life. Morrison's fake lawyers were looking at each other uncertainly, probably wondering if their paychecks were worth whatever was about to happen to them. With 10 seconds left on the timer, Morrison broke. What do you want? Simple, Michael said, pressing the button again. You're going to write a full confession detailing your entire operation. Names, dates, methods, clients, everything. And then you're going to turn yourself into the FBI. That's suicide. No, Thomas. Suicide is letting this timer run out while the FBI is listening to recordings of you admitting to 15 years of murder for hire. Morrison looked around the room desperately, like he was searching for options that didn't exist. I can't, he said finally. If I confess, my clients will have me killed before I ever see a courtroom. Then you have a choice, I said. Die eventually in prison, or die right now when that recording goes public. Morrison slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon. How do I know you won't release it anyway? You don't, Michael said. But I give you my word as a professional killer that if you cooperate, the recording stays private. It took Morrison 3 hours to write his confession. 3 hours of detailing murders, frauds, and conspiracies that stretched back a decade and a half. When he was finished, the document was 47 pages long and implicated over 100 people in crimes ranging from fraud to murder. There, Morrison said, signing the last page. It's done. Not quite, I said. There's one more thing. I pulled out my phone and called Ray Kowalski. Ray? It's Tommy. I need you to come to 1425 Hillcrest Drive immediately. And bring backup. Lots of backup. Tommy, where the hell have you been? Sarah's been worried sick. Sarah's safe. But I have a confession to give you. About 15 years' worth of murders that just got solved. When the FBI finished processing the scene at Morrison's estate, they found enough evidence to launch investigations in 12 states. The confession led to arrests of 63 people, including Morrison's clients, his network of contractors, and several corrupt officials who'd been facilitating his operations. Thomas Morrison himself died in federal custody 2 weeks later, officially a suicide, though Michael suspected Morrison's former clients had longer reaches than anyone imagined. As for Michael Brennan, he disappeared the day after Morrison's arrest. Ray told me later that the FBI had offered him witness protection in exchange for his testimony, but Michael had declined. He said he had other business to attend to, Ray explained. Something about tying up loose ends. I never saw him again, but sometimes I wonder if he found whatever redemption looks like for a professional killer who decided to do the right thing. The insurance settlement from Morrison's fraud conviction was enough to ensure Sarah and I would never have to worry about money again. We used some of it to establish a foundation for families of murder victims. Martha would have liked that. But the real victory wasn't financial. The real victory was sitting in a hospital room 3 days after Morrison's arrest, watching my daughter sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks. No more looking over our shoulders, no more wondering if every stranger was a threat, no more living in fear. Sarah opened her eyes and smiled at me. Dad? Is it really over? It's really over, sweetheart. What happens now? I thought about that question for a long time. At 73, I'd survived something that should have killed me, fought enemies I never should have been able to defeat, and learned things about myself that I never knew existed. Now we live, I said. We live the life your mother would have wanted us to live. And for the first time since Martha's death, that felt like enough. If this story taught me anything, it's that family is worth fighting for, even when the fight seems impossible. Evil exists in this world, but so does the courage to stand up to it. Sometimes ordinary people have to do extraordinary things to protect the ones they love. Sometimes that's the only way justice gets done. Hit that subscribe button if you believe that good can triumph over evil, even when the odds are stacked against you. And remember, if you ever find yourself in a situation where powerful people want you dead, don't just run and hide. Fight back. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing you can be is a 73-year-old man with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. It's been the hardest story I've ever had to tell, but also the most important. Take care of yourselves, and take care of each other.